Tonight, we're going to explore how ancient humans invented the wheel, beginning in a world where nothing rolls beneath you, no cart rattles along a road, and every heavy object must somehow be dragged, carried, lifted, or persuaded to move through sheer patience. You stand in that older world now. The ground beneath your feet is uneven and dusty. Somewhere nearby, a stone axe strikes wood with a dull, steady rhythm. You smell damp earth, animal hide, wood smoke, and crushed grass. People move baskets, bundles, stones, jars, timber, and food with their hands, shoulders, backs, and whatever clever tricks they can discover. There are no wagons waiting conveniently beside the house, no wheelbarrows, no cheerful little garden carts. If you want a heavy object somewhere else, your options are painfully direct. You pick it up, or you drag it. And sometimes, with admirable prehistoric optimism, you convince several relatives to help. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you feel like sharing, tell everyone where in the world you are listening from and what your local time is. Perhaps it is late evening, perhaps well past midnight, or perhaps you have simply decided that ancient transport technology is exactly what your afternoon needs. Now, dim the lights and allow the landscape around you to become quieter. Long before wheeled vehicles appear, human beings already understand a basic problem very well. Heavy things are difficult to move. This sounds almost insultingly obvious, but much of technology begins with exactly that sort of irritation. A stone is heavy, a tree trunk is awkward. A basket of grain becomes surprisingly unfriendly once you carry it far enough. Your muscles complain, and your mind begins negotiating. Early communities solve these problems in many ways. People carry smaller loads in baskets, sacks, slings, and containers. They use poles across the shoulders. They work in groups. They shift objects little by little. But when a load becomes too heavy to lift comfortably, dragging becomes an obvious solution. Imagine a large animal carcass, a bundle of timber, or a substantial stone. Instead of lifting the entire weight, you pull it across the ground. The earth supports much of the load. Unfortunately, the earth is not especially cooperative. The object catches on roots. Stones block the way. Soft soil absorbs effort. Rough surfaces create friction. You pull harder. The object remains deeply committed to its current location. This is where one of humanity's oldest transport tools becomes important: the sledge. A sledge is wonderfully simple. A load rests on runners or a flat structure that can be pulled across the ground. There are no rotating parts. Nothing needs bearings, hubs, or precise circular carpentry. You simply create a smoother surface between the load and the earth. In snowy regions, the usefulness is obvious. Runners glide over packed snow far more easily than an irregular object dragged directly behind you. But sledges also work on dry ground, especially if people prepare the route. Records and archaeological evidence confirm that sledges remain important even after wheeled vehicles exist. This is a useful reminder that inventions rarely arrive and instantly erase everything older. Human beings are practical. If a sledge works better for a particular job, they keep using it. You can almost hear an ancient worker responding to some enthusiastic neighbour, praising a fashionable new device. Very impressive. Now please move this enormous stone through sand. The pre-wheel world is full of such practical choices. Suppose you need to transport timber from one place to another. A straight branch or log can be dragged. If the load is larger, several people can pull together using ropes made from plant fibers, leather, or other materials. The journey may be slow, but slow is not the same as impossible. Ancient people become skilled at organizing labor. They understand leverage even without formal equations. They know that pulling from the correct angle helps. They know that a heavy object can be rocked, tilted, raised, supported and shifted in stages. You feel the rough fibre of a rope against your palms, feet dig into the soil. Someone calls out a rhythm, so everyone pulls together. The load moves a little, then everyone stops, then it moves again. Technology here is not one magical object. It is a collection of small observations. A smoother path helps. A flatter base helps. More people help. A stronger rope helps. Wet ground may help in one situation and create a swampy nightmare in another. People learn through repetition because repetition is unavoidable. One curious footnote in the long history of heavy transport is the use of lubricated surfaces, water, mud, oil, animal fat, or other slippery materials can reduce resistance depending on the environment and the materials involved. You do not need modern physics terminology to notice that something slides more easily across a slick surface. You only need tired arms. Experiments with dragging probably happen countless times in countless communities, most leaving no written description and little archaeological trace. This creates a difficulty for historians. Historians still argue whether certain transport ideas developed independently in many places or spread gradually through contact between neighbouring communities. With simple technologies such as sledges, ropes, rollers, and prepared tracks, independent invention is entirely plausible. A person does not need instructions from a distant civilization to discover that dragging something over smooth ground is easier than dragging it over jagged stones. Yet knowledge also travels. People visit neighbours, traders cross landscapes, families migrate, craftsmen observe unfamiliar techniques. One community notices how another moves timber and returns home with an idea. Your mind drifts across a landscape connected not by roads in the modern sense, but by repeated paths. Feet create trails. Animals create trails. Loads create grooves. The same route used often enough becomes easier to recognize and sometimes easier to improve. People remove stones. They clear branches. They flatten sections of ground. This matters because transportation is not only about the object carrying the load, the surface beneath it matters just as much. Even today, the finest vehicle is rather less impressive when placed in a bog. In some environments, people may place branches, planks, or logs beneath a heavy load to help it move. The idea feels tantalizingly close to the wheel, but it is not yet the wheel. A log can roll. That is important. If you place round timber beneath a heavy object and push, the timber rotates as the load moves over it. Once a roller emerges behind the load, it can be carried to the front and used again. The technique can reduce friction dramatically on suitable ground. You can picture the process. Several people push. Someone crouches beside the path, waiting for a log to emerge. The log rolls free. It is lifted, hurried forward, placed beneath the load, and immediately disappears underneath again. Not elegant, not quick, but effective and exhausting in a different, more organized way. Oddly enough, the roller idea does not automatically lead to a wheeled cart. A rolling log and a wheel attached to an axle may look closely related to you because you already know what wheels are. For someone living without them, the conceptual leap is much larger. A roller moves with the load and then comes out behind it. A wheel must remain attached. That creates entirely new engineering problems. The wheel must be shaped accurately enough to turn. It must support weight. It must rotate around something or rotate together with an axle. The axle must remain positioned beneath the vehicle. The structure must survive bumps, twisting, and uneven surfaces. None of that is required when you simply place logs under a platform. So the humble roller is not an unfinished cart. It is its own useful technology, and there are situations where it works beautifully. Timber itself provides naturally cylindrical shapes. Large stones or structures can sometimes be shifted over prepared tracks using rollers, especially when workers can control the terrain. Yet rollers have serious limitations. On rough ground, they wander. On steep slopes, they become dangerous. On soft earth, They sink, and every few moments someone has to retrieve them, which must become tedious almost immediately. You begin to appreciate that the invention of transport technology is shaped by landscapes. A flat, firm surface rewards one solution. A forest path rewards another. Snow encourages runners. Sand changes everything. Mountain terrain may make carrying loads on people or animals more practical than attempting to drag large platforms. There is no universal prehistoric answer. There is only whatever works today without causing everyone involved to regret volunteering. As settlements grow larger, however, the need to move heavy materials increases. Farmers gather crops, builders require timber, potters need clay, communities store grain, stone travels from quarry sites, firewood must be collected constantly. The more settled life becomes, the more often people face the same quiet question. How do you move more while exhausting yourself less? Agriculture intensifies this problem because harvests create bulk. A handful of grain is easy to carry. A season's harvest is not. You fill baskets and containers. You carry them repeatedly between fields, storage places, homes, and processing areas. Domestic animals can help carry loads, but animals have limits too. Some species are better suited to carrying on their backs. Others eventually become valuable for pulling. Yet pulling requires something behind them. And before carts become practical, sledges offer one answer. You hear a wooden runner scrape across dry ground. The sound is slow and coarse, a steady grinding beneath the softer noises of voices and footsteps. It is easy to dismiss this technology because you know what comes later. But a sledge is a genuine improvement. It distributes weight. It provides a stable platform. It can be constructed with materials already familiar to woodworkers. It can transport loads that would otherwise need to be divided among many carriers. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches people to think of transport as a system. You have the load, you have the platform, you have the pulling force, you have the route. Change one part, and the entire task may become easier. Scholars bicker over exactly how much specific early transport experiments contributed to the eventual invention of the wheel. The archaeological record cannot preserve every wooden device, every temporary track, or every clever solution tried beside a forgotten settlement. Wood decays, rope disappears, ordinary tools vanish. What survives is only a fragment of what people actually use. So you are left with possibilities rather than a neat moment when someone suddenly announces that circular motion might be useful. Real invention is usually messier. Someone notices a rounded branch moves differently. Someone smooths a runner. Someone prepares a path. Someone discovers that a load slides better when the ground is damp. Someone else realizes that round logs placed underneath can carry weight while turning. None of these people necessarily thinks they are changing civilization. They are trying to finish a difficult afternoon. That may be one of the most comforting truths about technology. Great changes often begin as small attempts to reduce annoyance. The sun lowers over the settlement. Work slows. A sledge rests beside a stack of wood. Nearby, several straight logs lie where workers have been using them as rollers. Nothing here looks revolutionary. There is no gleaming machine, no dramatic declaration. Only worn timber, compacted earth, rope fibers, tired hands, and generations of accumulated experience. And within those ordinary details, you can sense the beginnings of a new way of thinking about motion. Not yet a wheel, just a growing realization that heavy things do not always have to fight the ground. Sometimes the ground can be persuaded to cooperate. You sit beside a low work area where damp clay waits beneath careful hands. The air carries the earthy smell of wet soil, smoke from a nearby hearth, and the faint mineral scent that rises when water is mixed into clay. Around you, bowls, jars, cups, and storage vessels stand in different stages of completion. Some still soft, some drying in the shade, some already hardened by fire. Pottery is one of those crafts that seems peaceful from a distance. Up close, it is repetitive, precise, and occasionally determined to collapse just when you think everything is going rather well. You press your fingers into a lump of clay. It yields easily. Clay can be pinched into shape, built with coils, pressed into molds, or smoothed with simple tools. None of these methods requires anything to spin. Skilled hands can make remarkably fine vessels while the clay remains stationary. But pottery presents an irritating little problem. A round vessel is easiest to shape when you can reach every side evenly. You could move yourself around the pot, you could pick up the vessel and turn it, or you could place it on something that turns beneath your hands. That small shift changes the rhythm of the craft. Imagine a flat surface beneath the clay, perhaps a mat, board, shallow platform or carefully prepared disc. Instead of repeatedly repositioning the vessel, you rotate the support, your hands remain relatively steady, the pot comes to you. At first, the turning does not need to be fast. A slow rotating platform, sometimes described by archaeologists as a tournet or slow wheel, allows a potter to work around a vessel without constantly lifting or walking around it. You turn the platform a little, smooth the clay, turn it again, add another coil, turn again. The motion is deliberate, almost meditative. There is no blur of spinning clay, no dramatic transformation like the scenes you might see in a modern pottery studio. The earliest rotating devices used by potters may have been much simpler, and that simplicity matters. A freely spinning potter's wheel capable of maintaining momentum is not quite the same invention as a platform that can merely be rotated by hand. Records from archaeology confirm that pottery production becomes increasingly specialized in several early urban societies. As settlements grow and people require more containers for food, drink, oils, grain, trade goods, and household storage, skilled potters can produce large numbers of vessels. Uniformity becomes valuable. Speed becomes valuable. A pot that looks pleasantly symmetrical instead of leaning to one side like it has lost confidence is also valuable. Rotational tools help. Your fingers rest against the damp surface as the clay moves beneath them. Suddenly, small irregularities become easier to notice. A bump returns to your fingertips with every rotation. There it is, then again, then again. You press gently. The wall becomes smoother. Circular motion gives the craft a new kind of consistency. The relationship between hand and material changes because movement is now controlled rather than accidental. This is a quiet mechanical idea. A platform can rotate around a central point while the person using it stays mostly in place. That principle seems obvious to you because rotating objects fill your everyday life. Door handles, fans, bicycle pedals, office chairs, washing machines, clocks, drills, turntables, and hundreds of other devices depend on a rotation. But mechanical ideas are only obvious once someone has lived with them long enough. You watch the platform turn. Its center matters. If the clay sits too far from the middle, it wobbles. If the platform itself is badly balanced, every rotation sends the vessel slightly off course. If the support underneath catches or drags, motion becomes awkward. A potter learns these things through touch. There is no need to write down a theory of rotational mechanics. The hands understand. Smooth movement is better, balance is better, a stable center is better, and repeated rotation can accomplish something that repeated lifting cannot. Oddly enough, the earliest potter's wheels were probably not used to create the dramatic high-speed throwing technique familiar to modern pottery enthusiasts. The slow wheel helps with shaping and finishing vessels assembled by older methods such as coiling. A potter can build the walls gradually, then rotate the vessel while smoothing the joins. This creates an interesting overlap between old and new methods. New tools do not always replace older skills. Sometimes they simply sit beneath them and make them easier. You hear the soft scrape of clay against a smoothing tool, the platform turns, a thumb presses into the rim, the platform turns again. Nearby, another worker prepares clay by removing stones and impurities. Someone carries water. Finished vessels wait for firing. Pottery is not merely artistic decoration. It is infrastructure for settled life. Containers allow people to store dry foods, liquids, seeds, oils, and prepared meals. They make cooking easier. They help organize households. They make goods transportable and measurable. Once communities depend heavily on pottery, producing it efficiently becomes a serious economic concern. You may think of a bowl as a simple object. The person who needs 50 bowls probably thinks rather differently. As rotating platforms improve, the wheel can become heavier. A heavier disc has inertia. Once pushed into motion, it continues turning for a short time. Now the potter does not need to stop after every tiny adjustment. One hand or foot can give the wheel another push, and momentum carries the clay through several rotations. The movement becomes smoother, faster, more continuous. Your palms settle around the clay as it turns. The sensation is strangely calming. Instead of constructing the vessel one section at a time, a skilled potter can gradually draw the material upward, using pressure from both hands to control the walls. The clay seems almost alive beneath your fingers. Push too firmly and it collapses. Move too quickly and the shape distorts. Lose concentration and your promising jar becomes an interesting plate. There is gentle comedy in every craft because materials have no respect for ambition. The fast potter's wheel demands training. It rewards muscle memory, coordination, and an intimate understanding of moisture. Clay that is too wet may slump. Clay that is too dry resists shaping. The wheel itself must be stable enough to rotate without jumping or tilting. A central pivot must allow movement while supporting considerable weight. These practical problems encourage increasingly careful construction. A rotating disc is no longer merely a surface, it becomes a machine. A simple machine, certainly, but a machine nonetheless. A curious footnote appears when you consider how deeply pottery influences archaeologists' understanding of ancient societies. Broken pots survive astonishingly well. Wooden houses decay. Textiles vanish. Baskets disappear. But fired pottery shatters into fragments that can remain in the soil for thousands of years. As a result, civilizations that might have considered pottery completely ordinary leave archaeologists enormous numbers of ceramic clues. A broken cooking jar, discarded without ceremony, can eventually become the subject of an academic paper several thousand years later. Not a bad retirement for kitchen rubbish. Changes in pottery style can reveal trade connections, cultural preferences, workshop traditions, and technological developments. Wheel-made pottery often carries distinctive signs. Regular horizontal lines may appear where tools contact the rotating surface. The walls can become thinner and more symmetrical. Repeated shapes suggest standardized production. Experienced archaeologists learn to recognize how a vessel was formed from tiny details in the clay. You turn one fragment between your fingers. To an untrained eye, it is simply reddish pottery. To a specialist, it may preserve the gestures of a craftsperson who lived thousands of years ago. There is intimacy in that. Finger pressure can survive. Tool marks can survive. Even mistakes can survive. You begin to see invention not as a sudden flash, but as a conversation between body and material. The wheel teaches through resistance. A poorly balanced platform complains. A badly centered pot wobbles. A good design moves smoothly. Each rotation provides feedback. No agreement has been reached on whether the potter's wheel directly inspired the wheel used for transportation. The connection is tempting. Both involve circular objects turning around a center. Both require balance. Both benefit from careful woodworking and an understanding of rotation. It would make a satisfying story to imagine an ancient craftsperson staring at a spinning pottery platform and suddenly realizing that the same principle could carry a load. History, unfortunately, rarely arranges itself so neatly for documentaries. The technologies may have developed alongside one another, influenced by related mechanical knowledge without one directly causing the other. Dating early examples can also be difficult because wooden components rarely survive, while pottery and impressions in clay preserve only parts of the story. Scholars bicker over precise sequences in different regions, especially when trying to distinguish slow-rotating platforms from true fast wheels. What is clear is that ancient craftspeople become deeply familiar with controlled circular motion, and familiarity matters. You spend hours watching a surface rotate around a fixed point. You feel how momentum carries it. You notice that a larger, heavier disc behaves differently from a small, light one. You learn that the center must remain stable. You observe that smooth supports reduce resistance. These are not abstract principles anymore. They live in your hands. The workshop slowly fills with completed vessels. Some are wide and shallow. Others have narrow necks. Large storage jars wait against a wall, their rounded bodies catching the warm light. The speed of production changes what a skilled craftsperson can accomplish. Specialists can make vessels for people beyond their immediate household. Workshops can supply neighborhoods, institutions, traders, and growing towns. Shapes become recognizable. Styles travel. A particular kind of rim or decoration may become fashionable. Apparently, even several thousand years ago, people are capable of deciding that everyone suddenly needs the same sort of cup. Humanity remains reassuringly consistent. You listen to the wheel slowing. Its soft rhythm fades as friction gradually steals its motion. A hand pushes again. The disc gathers speed. The clay turns beneath steady fingers, always returning to the same place, always offering another chance to correct a curve. There is something profound hidden in this ordinary act. Circular motion does not simply repeat itself. It allows work to become continuous. The beginning meets the end. Every rotation brings the material back beneath the hand. A craftsperson can shape an entire circumference without changing position, transforming repetition into precision. The idea settles quietly into daily life, not as a grand proclamation, but as a familiar rhythm in the workshop. Push, turn, shape, smooth. The circle becomes useful. And once human hands become comfortable controlling a circle, rotation no longer feels mysterious. It becomes something that can be built, adjusted, improved, and trusted. You step into a workshop where wood is more precious than it first appears. The air smells of fresh shavings, resin, smoke, and earth. Outside, people move between mud brick buildings beneath a pale sky. Inside, a craftsperson kneels beside several thick wooden planks, studying their grain with the serious expression of someone who knows that one badly placed split can ruin many hours of work. The object taking shape on the floor is not delicate. It is broad, heavy, and surprisingly solid. The earliest transport wheels are nothing like the thin, elegant circles you might picture on a bicycle. They are thick wooden discs, built to survive weight, rough ground, and the punishment of everyday use. Making such a wheel is more difficult than simply cutting a slice from a tree trunk. That convenient method sounds sensible until you look closely at wood. A large tree trunk does provide a naturally round cross-section, but a single slice cut across the trunk is prone to splitting as the wood dries. Trees also wide enough to provide large wheels are not always easy to find, especially in regions where useful timber must be transported considerable distances. So craftspeople develop a more complicated solution. They join planks together. You crouch beside the unfinished disc. Several pieces of wood lie side by side, fitted carefully so that together they form a broad panel. Wooden braces, pegs, or other joining methods hold the pieces in place. Then comes the circular shape. There is no powered saw, no laser guide, no neat pencil compass bought from a hardware shop. Only measuring, marking, cutting, scraping, checking, and patience. Quite a lot of patience. A craftsperson must somehow create a wheel round enough to rotate without behaving like a lopsided dinner plate. You can almost feel the rough handle of an adze in your hands. Each strike removes another small piece of wood. Chips fall onto the floor. The edge slowly becomes smoother. Turn the disc, check the curve, cut again. A wheel does not have to be mathematically perfect, but the closer it comes to a regular circle, the more smoothly it can travel. A badly shaped wheel lifts the vehicle slightly with every rotation. Imagine riding on that. Up, down, up, down. Ancient suspension technology consists mainly of hoping your teeth remain where they started. The challenge is not merely the outer edge. There must also be a carefully positioned opening at the centre. If that opening is misplaced, the wheel does not rotate evenly. The problem becomes immediately obvious when the disc turns. One side rises higher, the other falls lower. The entire vehicle rocks. So the centre matters enormously. A craftsperson who cannot calculate it with modern instruments can still discover it through geometry, measurement, experience, and repeated checking. Practical knowledge becomes exact because failure is irritating. You run your fingers over the wooden surface. It is thick enough to feel more like a small section of wool than a modern wheel. That weight provides strength, but it also creates another problem. Every extra piece of wood makes the vehicle harder to pull. The wheel must therefore survive heavy loads without becoming unnecessarily massive. Engineering begins negotiating with itself. Make it thicker, and it becomes stronger. Make it thicker, and it becomes heavier. Make it too thin, and it may crack. There is no perfect answer. There is only a useful compromise. Archaeological evidence places some of the earliest known wheeled transport in the 4th millennium before the Common Era, appearing across parts of Europe and Western Asia within a relatively narrow span of prehistoric time. Mesopotamia frequently receives attention in the story because early representations and archaeological evidence from the wider region show wheeled vehicles emerging amid increasingly complex settlements. A council decree does not announce the invention. No royal inscription proudly declares that someone has invented rolling transportation on a Tuesday afternoon. The evidence is quieter. Images, models, wheel tracks, vehicle remains, wooden components preserved in unusually favourable conditions. Together they show that people begin building machines whose wheels are not temporary rollers placed beneath a load. The wheels belong to the vehicle. That is an enormous difference. You stand beside one of these imagined early vehicles and look down. A solid wooden disc sits at each side. The wheel must remain connected while still being able to turn as the vehicle moves. This requires precision in places where two pieces of wood meet and rub against one another. Too loose, and the structure becomes unstable. Too tight, and friction makes turning difficult. Wood also changes with moisture. It swells. It shrinks. It warps. A wheel that fits beautifully during one season may behave differently when conditions become damp. Ancient carpentry therefore involves far more judgment than simply shaping timber. A skilled worker understands how different woods behave. Some are harder, some split more easily, some bend, some resist wear, some are easier to shape. Material choice becomes part of the invention. Records from surviving finds confirm that early wheels could be constructed from multiple planks rather than one enormous piece of timber. In some examples, carefully joined boards create the circular body, revealing substantial woodworking skill. You might expect the inventor of the wheel to be remembered as a single heroic genius. History refuses to cooperate. There is no known name, no portrait, no convenient biography involving an unusually curious child rolling stones downhill. The invention probably emerges from communities of skilled workers whose names are lost. Carpenters understand wood. Farmers understand heavy loads. Animal handlers understand pulling. Builders understand weight. Potters and other craftspeople understand rotation. Ideas move between people through work. An innovation this complicated is rarely the product of one isolated thought. It is more like a puzzle assembled by many hands. One scandalous aside, at least from the perspective of anyone who enjoys tidy historical stories, is that the phrase invention of the wheel makes the process sound much simpler than it really is. People already see round things everywhere. The sun appears round, the moon appears round, seeds, stones, tree trunks, and fruits can be round. Children certainly notice that objects roll downhill. The difficult part is not discovering that circles exist. The difficult part is building a durable circular machine that carries weight while remaining attached to a vehicle. That is rather less poetic. It is also much more impressive. You can roll a stone without inventing a wheel. You can roll a log without inventing a wheel. You need the complete mechanical arrangement before transportation changes. The disc must be strong. Its center must be properly placed. Its connection must allow reliable movement. Its materials must withstand repeated stress. And the entire vehicle must remain usable on actual terrain rather than on the beautifully flat surface available inside your imagination. Outside the workshop, the ground is not forgiving, Renoir. There are ruts, stones, mud, dry cracks, small slopes, roots. The wheel strikes every irregularity. A thick wooden disc can take punishment, but its edges wear. Wood fibers compress. Cracks develop. Repairs become part of ownership. Ancient vehicles are not maintenance-free. You suspect this immediately from the sound. A wooden wheel turns with a low creak. The structure groans. Every bump sends vibration upward. There is no rubber tire to soften the impact. No ball bearing hidden inside the hub. No mechanic nearby offering a complimentary inspection. Only wood, skill, grease, and a strong interest in reaching the destination. The first wheels are likely expensive in labour. A household cannot simply produce a good one in a spare hour. Selecting timber takes time. Shaping pieces takes time. Joining them securely takes time. Cutting a consistent circumference takes time. Creating the central opening takes time. Fitting the wheel into a working vehicle takes still more. This means early wheel transport may carry social significance as well as practical usefulness. A community with skilled specialists, access to wood, draft animals, and suitable routes can gain much more from wheels than a small mobile group crossing difficult terrain. Technology succeeds where society can support it. Scholars still argue whether wheeled transport first arose in one region and spread rapidly through contact, or whether related communities developed it independently in several places. The dates are close enough to make the question difficult. Wood rarely survives for thousands of years. Images can be ambiguous. Small clay models may resemble vehicles but do not always tell you exactly how full-size machines worked. Arguments split along questions of dating, trade connections, environmental conditions, and how quickly technical ideas could have travelled. Perhaps one breakthrough spreads astonishingly fast. Perhaps several groups facing similar problems arrive at related solutions. The silence of prehistoric workshops refuses to settle the matter politely. What remains undeniable is the sophistication hidden inside these thick discs. You watch a craftsperson test one. The wheel is raised slightly. A hand pushes the edge. It rotates. Slowly at first. Then another push. The movement is not perfectly smooth, but it is controlled. The same portion of the edge returns again and again. A small flaw becomes visible with each rotation. The craftsperson marks the spot. The wheel comes down. More wood is shaved away. Then it rises again. Turn. Watch. Adjust. Turn. Watch. Adjust. You begin to understand that roundness is not merely a shape. It is a performance. The wheel proves its quality only when it moves. A beautiful circle painted on a wall carries nothing. A working wheel must survive motion under weight. That transforms carpentry into mechanics. The wooden disc eventually receives a darker surface where hands, Tools, grease, dust, and use leave their marks. Its appearance is plain. No ornament is required. The achievement lies in what it does. A load that once seemed almost rooted to the landscape can now travel with repeated rotation beneath it. The wheel does not eliminate effort. Someone or something must still provide force. The road still matters. Weight still matters. Mud remains deeply unimpressed by human innovation. But the relationship between load and ground changes. Instead of the entire underside scraping continuously across the surface, the wheel turns. A small region touches the ground at each moment, then another, then another. The circle keeps presenting a new surface as the vehicle advances. It is simple enough to watch, difficult enough to build, and powerful enough to reshape movement. Evening settles around the workshop. Wood shavings lie scattered across the floor. A completed disc leans against a wall. Broad and heavy, its joined planks visible in the fading light. Nothing about it looks delicate. It looks stubborn. Perhaps that is exactly what the earliest wheel needs to be. Strong enough to carry, round enough to turn, simple enough to repair. The craftsperson brushes dust from the edge and runs a hand across the surface, feeling for imperfections too small for the eye to notice. The circle is no longer merely something found in nature. Human hands have measured it, cut it, joined it, tested it, and made it work. You place your hand against the side of a wooden wheel and discover an uncomfortable truth almost immediately. A wheel by itself is not enough. It can roll, certainly. A round disc pushed across the ground will move. But if you want it to carry a vehicle, support a load, remain aligned, and keep turning without wandering off into a ditch, something must hold it in place. That something is the axle. The idea sounds simple when you say the word axle. One short term for a problem that requires carpentry, balance, friction control, and a rather intimate understanding of what happens when two heavy pieces of wood rub against each other for several hours. You stand beside an early vehicle and crouch low enough to inspect the structure beneath it. The smell is different down here. Dry earth, old grease, timber, dust, perhaps a trace of animal hair caught against a wooden beam. Above you rests the platform that carries the load. Beneath it, a strong horizontal shaft stretches from one side to the other. The wheels sit at its ends. Now the real engineering begins. There are two basic ways such a system can work. In one arrangement, the axle turns together with the wheels. The wheels are fixed firmly to the axle, so wheel and axle rotate as one unit. The axle itself passes through supports beneath the vehicle body. In another arrangement, the axle remains fixed while each wheel rotates around it. Both approaches can move a vehicle. Both create problems. Both demand precision. You can almost hear an ancient craftsperson sighing at this point. Apparently making the thing round was only the beginning. Suppose the wheels and axle turn together. You attach each wheel securely to the ends of a wooden shaft. When the vehicle moves, the wheels rotate, which means the axle rotates too. This can be mechanically strong. But the axle must pass through bearings or supports beneath the vehicle while turning continuously. Wood rubs against wood, friction appears, heat appears, noise appears, and if the surfaces are rough, the entire arrangement resists movement. You push the vehicle a little. Creak. Another push. Creak. The sound may be slow and rhythmic, almost soothing if you are lying in bed several thousand years later. If you are the person pulling the vehicle, perhaps less soothing. Records from archaeological finds confirm that early wheeled vehicles sometimes used rotating axle systems. The wheels and axle could form a rigid unit, moving together beneath the body of the cart. That construction has an interesting consequence. When the cart turns a corner, the wheel on the outside of the curve needs to travel farther than the wheel on the inside. But if both wheels are locked to the same axle, They must rotate at the same speed. Something has to give. One wheel may slip slightly, the vehicle may drag across the turn, the ground may absorb the difference. On a broad, slow turn across dirt, this is manageable. On a tight corner, it becomes awkward. You begin to appreciate how many modern mechanical conveniences are invisible because they work so well. Differentials, bearings, lubricants, metal fittings, suspension systems, carefully machined hubs. Ancient builders have none of these in modern form. They have wood, they have animal fat, they have oils, and they have experience, and they have a strong motivation to reduce the amount of swearing required to move grain. A fixed axle presents a different solution. The axle becomes a stable beam attached beneath the vehicle. Each wheel turns independently around the axle end. Now the outer wheel can rotate more than the inner wheel during a turn. Cornering becomes easier. But this arrangement demands a reliable hole through the centre of each wheel and a carefully shaped axle end that fits inside it. Too tight, and the wheel binds. Too loose, and it wobbles. Too rough, and friction increases. Too thin, and the axle may break. Too thick, and the whole assembly becomes heavy. You run your fingers around the centre opening of the wooden disc. The surface must be smoother than the outer edge. This is where repeated rubbing occurs. A small irregularity may gradually wear away, but it may also damage the wood. Dust works into the joint. Heat dries the surfaces. Moisture makes them swell. The axle and hub become a place of constant negotiation. A curious footnote in early vehicle technology is how important grease becomes. Animal fats, oils, and other lubricating substances can reduce friction where wood moves against wood. You smear a small amount across the contact surface. The difference is immediate. Movement becomes quieter, smoother, less resistant. The axle turns more freely. Grease may not sound like one of civilization's glamorous inventions, but the history of machinery would be considerably louder without it. You can imagine the practical knowledge accumulating. If the cart squeaks more loudly, check the axle. If the wheel grows hot, check the axle. If the vehicle begins dragging strangely, check the axle. If a wheel falls off entirely, perhaps check several things. There is a reason ordinary maintenance becomes part of transport culture. The axle is under enormous stress. It supports the vehicle body. It carries the weight of goods. It absorbs shocks from uneven ground. It transfers force between wheel and platform. Every stone, rut, and hardened clump of earth sends a small impact into the structure. The axle must flex slightly without snapping. Wood selection matters. A straight grain helps. Knots can create weak points. A badly chosen piece may split under pressure. Skilled woodworkers therefore inspect timber carefully. The axle is not merely a stick placed between two circles. It is a load-bearing component. You lift one end of an imagined cart and feel the weight shift. The force concentrates near the supports. If the axle sits badly, the vehicle leans. If the wheels differ in diameter, one side rides higher. If the central openings are misaligned, the wheels do not track evenly. Suddenly the entire machine becomes a lesson in symmetry. A wheel can be slightly imperfect and still work. An axle can be slightly imperfect and still work. But when several small imperfections combine, the vehicle becomes stubborn. One wheel wobbles, the axle rubs. The platform tilts. The draft animal pulls harder. The driver wonders which ancestor offended the gods. Ancient engineering lives inside these tolerances. No agreement has been reached on exactly how quickly axle designs improve across different early wheeled societies. Archaeological preservation is uneven, and wooden components often survive only under exceptional conditions. Scholars bicker over whether certain technical similarities indicate direct transmission between communities or simply reflect the limited number of practical ways to build a wooden cart. If you need two wheels to stay connected beneath a platform, many builders may eventually arrive at related solutions. Yet the details can vary. Axle thickness, wheel construction, attachment methods, lubrication, vehicle width. These choices reveal local materials and local experience. You hear another sound now, not just the creak. A low wooden knock accompanies each irregularity in the road. The cart is moving across firm ground with a load of sacks or baskets. The axle beneath you works constantly. It rotates, or it supports rotating wheels, depending on the design. Either way, its job is invisible from above. That is often how important technology behaves. You notice the wheel because it is obvious, large, round, moving. The axle hides beneath the vehicle, covered in dust. Yet without it, the wheels cannot remain where they belong. The axle turns separate objects into a system. This distinction matters. A wheel is a component. A wheeled vehicle is an arrangement of components that cooperate. The wheel supports movement. The axle maintains alignment. The frame carries the load. The draft force pulls the structure. Each part depends on the others. Change one, and everything else responds. You make the vehicle wider. Now the axle must be longer. A longer axle may bend more easily, so perhaps it must also be thicker. A thicker axle adds weight. More weight requires more pulling force. The solution creates another problem. You narrow the vehicle. Now it may fit smaller tracks, but stability changes. A tall load might tip more easily. You enlarge the wheels. They may cross uneven ground more effectively, but they require more wood and stronger construction. Nothing exists in isolation. Early vehicle builders learn systems thinking without calling it systems thinking. They simply discover that when they improve one thing, 3 other things become irritated. There is gentle familiarity in this. Anyone who has repaired a house, bicycle, appliance, or elderly piece of furniture recognizes the pattern. You fix the wobble. Now something squeaks. You fix the squeak. Now the drawer refuses to close. Human technology has always enjoyed a sense of humor. The axle also changes the way people think about straightness. For 2 wheels to travel together efficiently, their alignment matters. If one wheel angles inward and the other outward, the cart fights itself. The structure beneath the vehicle must hold the axle in a stable relationship with the frame. Woodworkers must therefore build not only strong parts, but correctly aligned parts. You stand in the workshop while a craftsperson checks the fit. One wheel turns, then the other, the axle is lifted, the frame is adjusted, a peg is driven into place, the vehicle is rolled a short distance. Everyone watches. A small sideways pull becomes obvious. Back to the workshop. The process repeats. This is experimentation in its most practical form. There are no notebooks full of equations. The road itself is the test. If the cart travels straight, the geometry is acceptable. If it drifts, something needs correction. If the axle overheats, friction is too high. If a joint breaks, the wood or construction is inadequate. Each failure teaches, each repair adds knowledge. Eventually, certain proportions and methods become familiar. Apprentices learn from experienced builders. A master carpenter may recognize the correct fit by sight or touch. A wheel hub is shaved slightly. An axle end is polished. Grease is added. The cart rolls again. This kind of knowledge can survive for generations without written instructions. Hands teach hands. The axle also changes the meaning of rotation. A rolling log moves freely beneath a load. A pottery platform turns round a centre. But here, rotation is constrained and directed. The wheel must rotate exactly where the vehicle needs it. The axle controls that movement. It allows turning while preventing escape. There is something almost elegant about it. Freedom and restriction combined. The wheel is free to spin. It is not free to wander. That balance makes transport possible. One scandalous aside is that the axle may deserve nearly as much credit as the wheel itself. although it receives far less attention in popular imagination. Nobody says someone has reinvented the axle when describing an obvious idea. Nobody uses "the greatest thing since the axle" as a compliment. The circle has excellent public relations. The horizontal wooden shaft beneath it does the quiet work. Yet a useful wheeled vehicle requires both. You press against the side of the cart again. This time it moves with surprising ease. The wheels rotate. The axle behaves. The platform remains level. The load advances, not effortlessly, but smoothly enough that the difference is unmistakable. The entire machine feels more controlled. The force of your push becomes forward motion instead of being wasted in scraping and misalignment. The wood creaks softly beneath the weight. Dust gathers on the outer rims. A faint smell of warm grease rises from the hub. The axle continues its hidden labour, turn after turn, carrying stress without complaint. And beneath the slow rhythm of the moving vehicle you can sense the deeper achievement. The circle has been given a place to belong. You wake to the sound of wooden wheels passing over packed earth. Not quickly. Nothing about the vehicle outside suggests speed. The rhythm is slow and irregular. A hollow knock followed by a creak, then another knock as the cart crosses a shallow rut. Somewhere nearby, an animal snorts. A driver calls softly. Clay jars touch against one another with small ceramic clicks. The cart is carrying ordinary things. That is exactly why it matters. Grain, firewood, clay, bundles of reeds, perhaps jars of oil or beer, perhaps tools, perhaps produce from fields beyond the settlement. The wheel becomes truly important when it leaves the workshop and joins daily life. You step outside into a settlement where paths run between houses, work areas, storage buildings, fields, animal pens, and nearby water. The ground is not paved in the modern sense. It is compacted by feet, hooves, and repeated traffic. Dust lies loose in dry weather. After rain, mud gathers in low places. A cart stands beside a household courtyard. Its structure is uncomplicated. A wooden platform rests above 2 or perhaps 4 wheels, depending on design and purpose. The sides may be low. The body may resemble a simple box or flatbed. Ropes secure the load. Nothing about it appears luxurious. It is a tool, and tools become powerful when they save effort over and over again. Imagine the harvest season. Fields produce grain in quantities that must be gathered, moved, processed, stored, redistributed, and sometimes traded. A person carrying a basket can move only so much at once. A cart changes the scale. You lift one basket onto the platform, then another, then another. Soon the load represents the work of many individual carrying trips. The vehicle still requires effort to move, certainly, but the weight is distributed through the frame and wheels. A load becomes concentrated into one journey. That matters when the field is distant. It matters even more when the same route must be travelled repeatedly. You feel the coarse texture of a grain sack beneath your hands as you push it into place. Dust rises. Someone tightens a rope around the load. The cart creaks slightly as the weight settles. It is easy to think of transportation as a dramatic journey between distant cities. Most ancient movement is much less glamorous. People need to move things from the field to the village, from the riverbank to the workshop, from the woodlot to the hearth, from the clay source to the potter, from the storage building to the household. The cart becomes useful because daily life is full of short distances made difficult by heavy loads. Records confirm that wheeled vehicles appear in farming and settled communities by the late 4th millennium before the Common Era, and images from the ancient Near East show carts and wagons serving practical purposes as well as ceremonial ones. Their presence tells you something larger about society. A cart requires materials, it requires woodworking skill. It requires maintenance. It often benefits from animal power. It works best where roots are firm enough to support its weight. So the cart is not simply an invention sitting alone. It belongs to an entire landscape of farming, settlement, craft specialization, animal management, and exchange. You walk beside one as it moves toward a storage area. The vehicle does not glide. The wheels bump against hard clods of soil. The frame shifts. The load sways gently. The driver watches the path ahead because a deep rut or large stone can cause trouble. Road quality suddenly matters more than it did when everyone simply walked. A narrow footpath can twist around obstacles. A loaded cart is less flexible. It needs width. It needs clearance. It needs ground firm enough not to swallow the wheels. Repeated cart traffic gradually marks the landscape. Tracks deepen. Certain routes become preferable. People may clear stones, level troublesome sections, or choose flatter approaches. You begin to see a subtle transformation. Transportation technology encourages route improvement. Improved routes make transportation technology more useful. The two reinforce each other. A village path becomes something close to a road because enough people have reason to keep using it. In your ears, the slow wheel noise becomes mixed with other everyday sounds. A hand mill grinding grain, a goat complaining about something mysterious, children calling, a hammer striking wood. The cart arrives beside a group of workers, the sacks come down, storage begins, then the vehicle is empty again and ready for another purpose. That flexibility gives it enormous value. A cart can carry food in the morning and timber in the afternoon. It can move building materials. It can transport containers too heavy or awkward for a comfortable human load. It may carry sick or elderly people. It may help move household possessions. It may bring harvested crops home before weather changes. One useful machine serves many needs. Ancient households understand versatility perfectly well. You do not buy one machine for every specialized task when every machine takes substantial labor and resources to make. You use the same object repeatedly, repair it, modify it, keep it working. Wooden carts require constant attention. The wheels wear, pins loosen, joints shift, the body cracks, mud cakes around the lower structure. A wheel may become damaged by rough terrain. A cart owner learns its noises. A new creak means something. A change in how it pulls means something. Perhaps a fastening has loosened. Perhaps the axle needs attention. Perhaps one side carries too much weight. A vehicle develops personality almost accidentally. You can imagine someone insisting that the cart always makes that sound and is perfectly fine. Human relationships with machinery begin very early. A curious footnote is that carts may also appear in miniature form. Archaeologists have found small clay models of wheeled vehicles in several prehistoric and ancient contexts. Some may be toys, some may be ritual objects, some may represent vehicles symbolically, and some may have purposes that remain uncertain. The idea of a tiny clay cart is strangely intimate. You picture a child pushing one across a courtyard, making whatever sound ancient children decide vehicles should make. Perhaps a grandparent watches nearby. Perhaps nobody considers the little object important. Thousands of years later, someone carefully brushes soil from it and places it in a museum display. Everyday life has a habit of becoming archaeology when given enough time. The full-sized cart, meanwhile, moves through an increasingly organized economy. Farmers produce surpluses. Craftspeople require raw materials. Builders need wood, reeds, mud, stone, and other supplies. Officials or institutions may collect goods. Markets develop. Exchange networks widen. Transportation affects how much material can move and how often. Suppose you grow grain beyond what your household immediately consumes. If carrying every sack to another settlement is exhausting, distance limits trade. If a cart allows a larger quantity to travel in one journey, the useful economic radius expands. Not infinitely. The cart remains slow. Animals need food and water. Drivers need rest. Roads may be poor, bandits, weather, and accidents remain unpleasant possibilities. But the amount moved per journey changes. That can alter the value of distant fields, quarries, forests, and markets. A settlement no longer depends quite so heavily on whatever lies within easy carrying distance. You pause beside a pottery workshop. Rows of jars wait for distribution. Ceramics present a particular problem. They are useful. They are also breakable. A cart allows many vessels to travel together if packed carefully with straw, reeds, cloth, or other cushioning materials. The road becomes a test of everyone's packing skill. One deep hole can turn commerce into a collection of interesting fragments. So drivers learn routes. They know which path is smoother. They know where wheels sink after rain. They know which crossing becomes dangerous when the river rises. Practical geography develops through repeated movement. The map exists in memory. Turn near the stand of trees. Avoid the low ground. Cross the stream farther upstream. Stop near the well. People learn distance not in abstract units but in effort. 1 load, half a day, 2 stops, 1 troublesome hill. A cart gives landscape a new measure. You reach a slope and immediately understand one limitation. Going uphill demands force. The cart may reduce friction on level ground, but gravity remains stubbornly employed. People push from behind. Animals lean into harness. The driver chooses a diagonal route if possible. Everyone becomes aware of weight. Descending can be worse. A heavy cart gathers momentum. Without sophisticated brakes, controlling it requires care. Ropes, drag devices, human assistance, and cautious handling may be necessary. A vehicle that is convenient on flat ground can become an alarming wooden argument with gravity on a steep descent. Terrain decides whether wheels are a blessing or a nuisance. Historians still argue whether the earliest carts primarily transform agriculture first, trade first, elite transport first, or several activities at roughly the same time. The evidence rarely gives a perfectly ordered sequence. Images may emphasize ceremonial scenes because elites are more likely to commission art. Archaeological remains may preserve practical vehicles only by chance. Different regions almost certainly use carts in different ways depending on crops, settlement patterns, animal power, and road conditions. Arguments split along the nature of the evidence. A decorated image may tell you what people wanted to display. A wheel track tells you that something actually passed through. A clay model tells you that the idea mattered enough to reproduce. None tells the whole story alone. For a moment, it feels as though you are standing near a busy gateway. Carts arrive from surrounding farmland. One carries grain, another brings bundles of reeds, a third holds timber cut outside the settlement. Workers unload, other goods go out. The wheel is becoming part of the rhythm of exchange. Not spectacular, persistent. That persistence is the real transformation. A single cart journey saves effort once. Hundreds of journeys reshape labour. A household can move more material. A farmer can bring a larger harvest inward. A builder can obtain heavier supplies. A trader can carry more goods. A community can organise storage on a larger scale. The cart becomes a multiplier. It does not create grain. It does not cut timber. It does not shape clay. It simply allows the results of those activities to move more efficiently. And movement connects everything. You watch workers loading clay near a riverbank. The material is dense and wet. Carrying it in small baskets is possible but tedious. On a cart, larger quantities move toward the workshops. The potter's production depends partly on transportation. Nearby, bundles of firewood travel toward kilns and household hearths. Fuel is bulky. Again, the cart helps. Later, empty containers may travel in the opposite direction. A transportation system begins to develop patterns. Raw material inward, finished goods outward, harvest inward, trade goods outward, waste outward, fuel inward. The humble cart touches almost every corner of settlement life. Oddly enough, prestige quickly finds its way into practical technology. Once vehicles become visible symbols of mobility and resources, some are decorated, displayed, or associated with high status. Owning a fine vehicle can say something about wealth. The quality of the wood matters, construction matters, animals matter, decoration matters. Apparently, the desire to make transportation communicate social position does not wait for the invention of polished metal badges and heated leather seats. Even a wooden cart can make a statement. Yet most daily vehicles remain workhorses. Dust coats them, mud stains them. Their surfaces become polished where hands repeatedly grip the same places. Ropes leave grooves. Wheel rims become chipped. Repairs accumulate. A replaced plank is a different colour. A peg protrudes where a joint has been reinforced. Use writes history directly onto the object. You place a hand on the side rail as the cart begins another journey. The wood is warm from the sun. The vehicle lurches gently, then settles into motion. The wheels turn at a walking pace. Fields stretch beyond the settlement. Smoke rises from cooking fires. The road carries people, animals, burdens, and news. No one needs to celebrate the wheel every morning. That is how you know it has become important. It is ordinary now. It belongs beside baskets, ropes, hose, jars, and grinding stones. It has entered the unremarkable machinery of survival, and perhaps the deepest sign of technological success is exactly that moment, when people stop staring at an invention and simply begin loading it with grain. You stand beside a broad-shouldered ox while someone adjusts a wooden yoke across its neck. The animal shifts its weight, flicks one ear, and exhales through its nostrils with a deep, patient sound. Dust clings to its hide. The scent around you is warm and earthy, mixed with straw, leather, dung, dry grass, and the faint resinous smell of the wooden harness. The cart behind it is already loaded. Several sacks rest across the platform. A bundle of tools lies near the side. The wheels are still. Everything now depends on muscle. Not human muscle this time. Animal power changes wheeled transport from a clever labour-saving device into something much larger. A cart pulled by people can be useful. A cart pulled by a strong draft animal can move heavier loads, travel farther, and free human bodies for other work. The difference is not merely convenience. It changes what a community can attempt. You watch the handler place the yoke carefully. Domestic cattle are especially important because they combine strength with endurance and a temperament that can be trained for steady pulling. An ox is usually a castrated male bovine trained for draft work. He is not fast. Nobody looks at an ox and thinks of speed. He is built for persistence. That makes him ideal for dragging ploughs, hauling carts, pulling sledges, and moving heavy loads over moderate distances. The animal leans forward, the harness tightens, the cart creaks, then the wheels begin to turn. The movement feels completely different from pushing a loaded vehicle by hand. The animal's body produces a continuous force. Step, pull, step, pull. The load follows. You walk beside the cart and hear the soft thud of hooves mixed with the rhythmic wooden sounds of the vehicle. For the first time, transportation begins to feel less like a burst of collective effort and more like sustained travel. That distinction matters. Human beings can pull heavy loads, especially in groups, but the cost is high. People tire quickly. Their hands are occupied. Their pace may be slow. Animals transform food into mechanical work. Grass becomes movement. That is an extraordinary economic equation. A grazing animal feeds on vegetation. Humans may not be able to digest and converts it into pulling power. Milk, manure, hide, meat, and offspring. One creature can support several parts of an agricultural system. Records confirm that cattle are among the earliest major draft animals used with wheeled vehicles in parts of the ancient Near Eastern Europe. Their role grows alongside settled farming, where communities already have reasons to breed, feed, control, and train large animals. Training is essential. A powerful animal that refuses direction is less a transportation system and more an unscheduled event. You stand near a young ox being accustomed to the yoke. At first, it may resist the pressure. It turns its head. It pulls sideways. It stops. The handler uses voice, touch, habit, and repetition. Over time, the animal learns commands: move, stop, turn, stand. A team must work together. Two cattle yoked side by side need to match one another reasonably well in height and pace. If one animal surges forward while the other hesitates, the load shifts awkwardly. If one prefers turning left for reasons known only to itself, the driver develops a particularly intimate relationship with patience. Animal transport is therefore not just a mechanical system, it is a living system. Every journey depends on temperament, health, weather, food, training and trust. You can replace a wooden peg. You cannot repair an exhausted ox with a hammer. The animal needs water, rest, feed, protection from injury. Its hooves matter, its shoulders matter. The harness must fit correctly. A badly designed yoke can rub skin raw, restrict movement, or waste pulling force. So harness technology develops alongside vehicle technology. The shape of wood against an animal's body becomes an engineering problem. Where should pressure fall? How should the pulling force transfer into the cart? How do you keep the yoke stable? The answers vary across cultures and animal species. You reach out and feel the smooth surface where the yoke has been polished by repeated use. It fits over the neck and shoulders. A central connection joins the yoke to the vehicle pole. When the animals step forward, their force travels through the harness into the cart. The cart moves because bodies, wood, rope, and wheels act together. It is easy to admire the wheel as the visible invention, yet the useful system extends far beyond it. A trained animal is effectively the engine, and unlike an engine made of metal, this one occasionally stops to chew. Oddly enough, ancient drivers often had to learn the personalities of individual animals almost as carefully as the properties of their vehicles. One ox might be calm, another stubborn. One responds quickly to voice, another needs a tap from a staff. Pairs could become familiar working partners. You begin to imagine the small human dramas hidden inside ancient transport. A farmer may prefer one animal for ploughing and another for hauling. A particular team may be known for reliability. A lazy animal may acquire a reputation across an entire household. Technology suddenly contains biography. The ox pulling your cart is not anonymous to the people who work with him. He has habits. He knows routes. He recognizes voices. He may even anticipate where the path leads. The cart reaches a junction. The handler gives a short command. The animals shift direction together. The front of the vehicle swings slowly. The wheels follow. The turn is broad and deliberate. Nothing happens quickly. But heavy transportation rarely needs drama. It needs reliability. This reliability allows people to move quantities that once demanded many separate trips. Agricultural life becomes especially dependent on draft power. Animals can pull carts loaded with harvested grain. They can bring manure to fields. They can haul fuel. They can move timber and building materials. The same cattle may also pull ploughs, helping cultivate larger areas. The relationship between animal power and farming becomes deeply intertwined. A household with strong draft animals possesses not merely livestock, but productive capacity. You can cultivate more land, move more material, reach farther markets, carry heavier harvests. The animal becomes part of wealth. That creates social differences. Not every household owns enough cattle. Some may borrow animals. Some may exchange labor. Some may rent or share teams. A wealthy landholder may control several. An animal that falls sick can disrupt an entire schedule. Suddenly, veterinary knowledge carries economic importance. You listen as someone checks an ox's hoof. The animal lifts its leg reluctantly, a crack, swelling, or embedded stone might prevent work. For modern listeners, a broken vehicle can feel inconvenient. For an ancient farming household during harvest, an injured draft animal can become a serious problem. Timing matters. Crops cannot always wait. Rain cannot be negotiated with. The cart may be ready, the road may be open, but without pulling power, nothing moves. This dependence encourages careful breeding and management. People favour animals with suitable strength, size, endurance, and behaviour. Over generations, human choices shape livestock populations. The animal and the technology begin influencing one another. Larger loads encourage stronger teams. Better harnesses make animal strength more useful. Improved vehicles allow the animals to move greater weights. The entire system becomes more efficient through small adjustments. A curious footnote appears when you consider the pace. Ox carts are often slow enough that a person can comfortably walk beside them. This may sound disappointing if you picture transportation as a race towards speed, but ancient economies often care more about capacity than velocity. A sack of grain does not complain about arriving slowly. Timber is remarkably patient. Clay rarely has appointments. If a cart can move several times what a person can carry, speed becomes less important than dependable hauling. You walk at the animal's shoulder. The pace settles into something almost hypnotic. Hoof, creak, hoof, creak. Grasshoppers buzz near the path. A distant bird calls. The driver's voice occasionally interrupts the rhythm. The journey is measured in steady steps. Other draft animals eventually enter the story of wheeled transport. Donkeys become important in many regions, especially for carrying and pulling lighter loads. Their endurance and ability to survive in dry environments make them extremely valuable. Horses later become famous for speed and military use, but early transport does not belong to horses alone. Cattle often perform the less glamorous work of moving heavy loads. There is something fitting about that. History remembers the animal that charges dramatically across a battlefield. Daily life often depends on the animal walking slowly home with barley. Donkeys bring another advantage. They can travel through landscapes where larger carts or cattle may be less practical. A donkey can carry packs directly on its back, making it useful even without wheels. When harnessed to smaller vehicles, it adds flexibility. Communities therefore choose animals according to terrain, available feed, distance, and load. There is no single perfect ancient engine. The environment decides. In dry regions, water requirements matter. In hilly landscapes, footing matters. On broad plains, heavy cattle teams may be ideal. On narrow trails, pack animals may remain superior. Technology adapts itself to geography. Scholars still argue whether the spread of wheeled transport depended more heavily on vehicle design or on the availability of suitable draft animals. The two questions are difficult to separate. A wheel without pulling power has limited value for heavy freight. A strong animal without an effective vehicle cannot exploit its strength efficiently. Some historians emphasize the importance of cattle domestication and agricultural organization. Others focus on carpentry, road conditions, and vehicle construction. Arguments split along regional evidence because different societies combine these elements in different ways. You cannot simply introduce a cart into any landscape and expect prosperity to roll politely behind it. Animals must be available. They must be trainable. They must be fed. The route must suit the vehicle. The community must have enough surplus to maintain the system. That requirement becomes clear when you stop near a watering place. The cattle drink deeply. Travel pauses. The cart does not care. The animals do. Their needs structure the journey. A driver must know where water can be found. Grazing opportunities matter on longer routes. Extreme heat reduces endurance. Mud increases resistance. A steep hill may require an extra animal or lighter load. Animal-powered transport creates a practical geography of stops and limits. Distance is no longer simply the space between 2 points. It is the amount of ground a team can cover while remaining healthy. You sit briefly in the shade while the animals rest. Their sides rise and fall, flies circle lazily. The wooden yoke lies heavily across their shoulders. Nothing about the scene feels mechanical, yet the entire arrangement is one of the great machines of the ancient world. Muscle supplies energy, harness transmits force, vehicle supports weight, wheels reduce resistance, road directs movement, human judgment controls the system. Each part has its own limitations. Together, they create something powerful. One scandalous aside is that the word horsepower would have made little sense to many early cart users whose most dependable engine was an ox. If they had invented their own unit of mechanical strength, perhaps modern cars would be advertised in ox power. It would certainly sound calmer. You can imagine someone proudly announcing that a vehicle possesses 200 oxen of power, followed by widespread concern about where to keep them. The actual animals beside you require no such exaggeration. They simply begin walking again. The load follows. The path opens across farmland. The cart carries more than goods. It carries the result of a new partnership between human planning and animal strength. People no longer rely only on their own bodies to move heavy material. They recruit another species into the machinery of civilization. That partnership demands care and control, but it multiplies what can be done. A farmer can move harvest farther. A builder can obtain heavier materials. A trader can carry more merchandise. A household can shift supplies with fewer human carriers. The world effectively becomes smaller because muscle now extends beyond the human body. You continue beside the team as the sunlight softens. The animals do not know that they are part of a technological revolution. They know the path. They know the voice behind them. They know the pressure of the yoke and the promise of rest at the destination, step by steady step. They turn the wheel from an ingenious object into a working transport network. You travel now along a broad ancient route where the wheel is no longer confined to one workshop, one village, or one river valley. It moves with people, with traders, with migrants, with soldiers, with animals, with stories told around fires at the edge of unfamiliar settlements. A technology spreads because someone sees it working and decides that perhaps their own life could become slightly less exhausting. You stand near a caravan route crossing open country. The soil is dry beneath your sandals, hooves press into dust, wooden wheels groan under loaded carts. Somewhere ahead, a cluster of buildings marks another settlement, another place where local craftspeople may examine a vehicle that did not originate there. They do not need written instructions. They can look, measure, touch, ask questions, try something similar. This is how useful ideas often travel through the ancient world, not as perfect copies, but as adaptations. A wheel suitable for one landscape may be inconvenient in another. A cart built from one species of timber may need a different construction technique elsewhere. A wide vehicle may work beautifully on open plains but become a nuisance on narrow tracks. So people borrow the principle and change the details. Records confirm that wheeled vehicles appear across a wide zone stretching through parts of Europe, Western Asia, and the ancient Near East during the 4th and 3rd millennia before the Common Era. The pattern suggests remarkably rapid movement of the idea by prehistoric standards. Rapid, of course, is relative. Nobody is uploading a wheel design to the cloud. Information moves at walking speed, at animal speed, at boat speed. A journey of several hundred kilometers can consume days or weeks. Yet over generations, a technology can cross enormous distances. You imagine a carpenter examining a foreign cart. Perhaps the wheel is thicker than local versions. Perhaps the body sits lower. Perhaps the axle is mounted differently. The visitor crouches beside it, running a hand along a joint. No translator is required to understand that the object moves. Its function is visible. Its strengths can be tested. Its weaknesses become equally obvious when it reaches bad ground. You begin to understand why the spread of the wheel is not really the spread of one object. It is the spread of a mechanical idea. Different societies produce different versions. In forested regions, timber may be abundant. In drier regions, good wood may be scarce and valuable. In marshy country, heavy carts may struggle. On broad steppe landscapes, wheeled vehicles can become extraordinarily useful. Environment acts like an editor. It keeps some designs, rejects others, forces modifications. The wheel travels, but it never travels alone. Roads matter. Animals matter. Woodworking traditions matter. Political stability matters. Trade matters. Even climate matters. A vehicle that performs well in dry weather may sink during seasonal rain. A cart that survives hard soil may crack on rocky ground. A wheel that lasts for years on one route may wear rapidly on another. You hear the scrape of the damaged rim as a driver stops to inspect it. The outer edge has chipped. A small repair is needed. Travel creates constant testing. Every kilometre judges the design. This practical pressure encourages regional differences. Some vehicles become wider, some narrower, some heavier, some lighter. Some use 2 wheels, others use 4. A 2-wheeled cart can be relatively manoeuvrable. A 4-wheeled wagon can carry substantial loads but may be more difficult to turn. The choice depends on purpose. You can almost hear a prehistoric argument between 2 neighbours. One praises stability, the other praises manoeuvrability. Both are correct. Neither will admit it. Human engineering debates probably begin shortly after human engineering. As wheeled transport spreads north and west into Europe, it encounters landscapes very different from the dry plains often associated with ancient Near Eastern civilizations. Forests dominate large areas. Rain creates mud. Rivers interrupt routes. Seasonal conditions can transform paths completely. People adapt. Wooden trackways may be constructed across wetlands. Firm routes become valuable. Carts move along corridors where terrain allows them. The wheel does not erase geography. It negotiates with it. For a moment, it feels as though you are walking beside a wagon entering a wooded settlement. People look up from their work, children watch, dogs investigate. The vehicle itself may not be entirely unfamiliar, but details attract attention. The wheel diameter, the shape of the body, the way the animals are harnessed. Travellers bring technology simply by arriving. A craftsperson can learn from an object without owning it. Perhaps a local wheelwright notices that a foreign builder uses a stronger joint. Perhaps a farmer realises that a larger wheel crosses ruts more easily. Perhaps a trader sees that a narrower wagon fits a particular route. Ideas become pieces that can be rearranged. A curious footnote is that ancient vehicles sometimes appear in burials. In parts of prehistoric Europe and Asia, wagons or wagon components are associated with elite graves. The presence of a vehicle in a burial tells you that it has become more than a practical tool. It carries symbolism, status, identity. Perhaps prestige connected with travel, ownership, wealth, or authority. A wagon large enough to move goods is useful. A wagon important enough to accompany someone into death is cultural. You stand at the edge of such a burial space. Wooden components may decay over centuries, but stains in the soil, metal fittings, wheel traces, and careful excavation can reveal where the vehicle once rested. The object is being treated as something significant. Technology has entered ritual life. That transition is easy to overlook. An invention begins by solving a practical problem. Then people attach meaning to it. They decorate it, display it, associate it with rank, use it in ceremonies. Eventually, the vehicle becomes part of how society imagines power. Nothing stays merely practical for long once humans become involved. A fine wagon can advertise resources. It requires wood, skill, animals, maintenance, storage, labour. Someone who possesses several vehicles probably commands considerable wealth. Transport becomes visible evidence of organisation. In larger settlements, administrators may depend on carts to move grain, taxes, construction materials, and supplies. A ruler who controls roads and draft animals controls movement. A temple or palace able to organise fleets of vehicles can gather resources from a wider area. The wheel therefore becomes entangled with administration. You see a line of loaded wagons arriving near a storage complex. Sacks come down, workers count, officials observe. The vehicle is no longer simply helping one household, it is serving institutions. That changes scale. A state can move food to workers. Armies can be supplied. Construction projects can receive materials from distant sources. Specialized crafts can depend on imported raw materials. The wheel becomes part of bureaucracy, which is perhaps the least romantic fate imaginable for such a famous invention. Still, civilization requires paperwork and grain delivery. The farther the wheel spreads, the more clearly you see that not every society adopts it in the same way. Some regions embrace wagons heavily, others use them selectively. Some continue depending on pack animals, boats, sledges, or human carriers. This does not necessarily indicate ignorance. A technology can be known and still remain inconvenient. Imagine a mountainous landscape. The path narrows between rocks. A sure-footed pack animal walks comfortably. A wide cart cannot. Now imagine a river-rich environment. Boats can carry enormous loads with relatively little effort. Why struggle to improve roads if the water already provides a transport network? Technology competes with alternatives. The best solution depends on the problem. In your ears, the sound of wheels fades briefly as you reach a river crossing. Here, boats dominate. Goods are transferred from cart to vessel. The river carries them downstream. At another landing, carts may take over again. Transportation systems combine methods. There is no requirement that one technology defeat all others. A jar might travel by wagon, then boat, then pack animal, then human hands before reaching its destination. Ancient logistics can be remarkably sophisticated. Merchants learn where each method works best. They calculate effort without modern spreadsheets. Distance, weight, season, risk, available animals, road condition, all of these shape decisions. The wheel expands trade, but it does not make trade simple. A wagon breaks, an animal falls ill, a river floods, a road becomes impassable, a local ruler demands payment. The ancient supply chain discovers stress very early. Oddly enough, wheel technology can reveal cultural contact even when written records are absent. Similar vehicle forms appearing in distant regions can suggest connections between communities, but similarity alone is dangerous evidence. Two groups facing the same mechanical problem may develop similar answers independently. A round wheel is likely to remain round no matter which language the carpenter speaks. This is why scholars bicker over whether the earlier spread of wheeled transport reflects one major centre of invention, followed by diffusion, several independent inventions, or some mixture of both. No agreement has been reached on whether the close dates across distant regions represent rapid transmission or parallel experimentation built on shared old technologies. The archaeological evidence is incomplete. Wood decays. Early vehicles are rarely preserved intact. Images can be difficult to interpret. Dating can shift as new discoveries appear. The debate remains open because prehistoric technology leaves fragments rather than instruction manuals. You move eastward in your imagination toward the broad grasslands of Eurasia. Here, open terrain changes the possibilities. Pastoral communities move livestock across long distances. Wagons can carry household goods, shelters, supplies, and people. A vehicle becomes not simply a farm tool, but part of mobility itself. For communities that move seasonally, a wagon may function almost like a portable storage room. You can pile possessions onto it, travel with herds, settle temporarily, then move again. The wheel adapts from supporting settled agriculture to supporting mobile life. That versatility helps explain its endurance. Different societies find different uses. A farmer sees harvest transport, a trader sees cargo, a pastoral family sees mobility, an official sees taxation, a military leader sees supply, a craftsperson sees a construction challenge. A child probably sees an excellent object to climb on. One machine enters many lives. You walk beside a wagon crossing open country under a wide evening sky. The horizon seems almost endless. Grass bends in the wind. The wheels leave 2 parallel marks behind. Those tracks are temporary, yet they symbolize something larger. Movement is becoming more structured. Repeated traffic creates corridors. Corridors encourage exchange. Exchange carries goods. Goods carry styles, materials, languages, beliefs, and technologies. The wheel therefore helps move more than objects. It moves culture. A decorated vessel travels to a distant settlement. Someone copies the design. A metal tool arrives from another region. A local craftsperson studies it. A new harness style appears. A different way of building a wagon follows. Transport increases the frequency of contact, and contact multiplies ideas. You cannot easily separate technological spread from human relationships. Marriage networks, seasonal migration, trade in partnerships, conflict, pilgrimage, diplomatic exchange, all can carry knowledge. A wheel may cross a cultural boundary because someone simply drives it across. The receiving community decides what to keep. Perhaps they copy the axle but not the body. Perhaps they increase the diameter. Perhaps they change the harness. Perhaps they reject the entire thing because local terrain makes it absurd. Adaptation is selective. That is why ancient vehicles are never perfectly uniform. The principle remains familiar, but the details become local. You arrive at a settlement where a repaired wagon stands beneath a shelter. One wheel is made from timber different from the others, a replacement. The body has been reinforced. The original builder may be long gone. The vehicle has acquired layers of modification. That tells you something important about how technology survives. People do not need to preserve an original design faithfully. They need to keep it useful. Repair encourages innovation. A broken part invites reconsideration. Could this joint be stronger? Could the wheel be lighter? Could the axle fit better? Could the body carry more? Every damaged vehicle becomes an opportunity for experimentation. The spread of the wheel is therefore not a single wave moving outward from one place. It is thousands of local decisions: copy, alter, repair, reject, improve, borrow. The ancient world becomes a vast workshop without walls. You can almost feel the cold iron latch of a later storage gate beneath your hand. Though much of the vehicle itself remains wood, materials change slowly. Techniques become more specialized. Communities learn which woods bend, which split, and which resist wear. Knowledge accumulates. Travelers recognize good wagons. Drivers recognize good roads. Carpenters recognize good wheels. The technology develops traditions. Some designs may become associated with particular regions. Others disappear. Competition between forms is constant but quiet. A design survives because it works, or because powerful people prefer it, or because the necessary materials are available, or simply because craftspeople already know how to make it. Technology can be conservative. Once a community has a reliable method, changing it introduces risk. A familiar cart that creaks but works may be preferable to a clever innovation that breaks 30 kilometers from home. So change occurs unevenly, slow in one place, fast in another. You look across the route as several vehicles pass in opposite directions. Their shapes differ, their loads differ, their animals differ, but the same basic principle connects them. Circular motion beneath weight, the idea has become portable. It belongs to no single settlement now, no single craft, no single people. It travels wherever environment, economy, and human ingenuity allow it to be useful. The wheels keep turning through dust, woodland, grassland, mud, market squares, farm tracks, and distant roads, each rotation carrying not only cargo but a small piece of shared mechanical knowledge across the ancient world. You hear the change before you fully understand it. The vehicle approaching across the dry ground does not produce the same heavy, lumbering rhythm as a thick wooden wagon. Its wheels seem quicker, the sound is sharper, lighter, hooves strike the earth in a faster pattern, and the whole machine appears to skim rather than grind its way forward. You look down at the wheel. Most of its centre is empty, instead of a solid wooden disc. Slender pieces of timber stretch outward from the hub like rays from a small sun. These are spokes, and they solve one of the most persistent problems in wheeled transport: weight. A solid wheel is strong, but it is also heavy. Every time a heavy wheel begins turning, energy is required to set all that wood in motion. Every time the vehicle accelerates, climbs, changes direction, or crosses difficult ground, that mass becomes part of the burden. The obvious solution is to remove some wood. The less obvious problem is removing it without causing the wheel to collapse. You kneel beside a spoked wheel and run your fingertips across the hub. This central wooden block must hold the axle securely while supporting spokes that extend outward toward the rim. Each spoke carries part of the load. Around the outside, separate pieces of wood form a circular felloe, or rim. Now the wheel is no longer one broad slab. It is a carefully balanced structure. Hub, spokes, rim. Each part depends on the others. Take away too much material and strength disappears. Use weak spokes and the wheel fails. Fit the rim badly and the circle distorts. Place the spokes unevenly and stress concentrates in dangerous places. The light wheel demands more precision than the heavy one. That is the price of elegance. You can almost hear a craftsperson explaining that yes, the new wheel is lighter, but no, this does not mean it is easier to make. Thank you very much. The workshop producing it must work carefully. The hub is drilled or shaped to receive the axle. Mortises are cut around its outer surface. The ends of the spokes fit into these openings. Their opposite ends fit into sections of rim. Measurements matter. Angles matter. The grain of the wood matters. If one spoke is slightly too long, the rim may bulge. If another is too short, the structure may loosen. The wheel must become both delicate and strong. That combination is difficult. Records confirm that spoked wheels appear by the second millennium before the Common Era and become closely associated with light. Fast vehicles such as chariots in parts of the ancient Near East and Eurasia. The solid wheel remains useful for heavy hauling. The spoked wheel answers a different need: speed. You stand beside a light two-wheeled vehicle. Its platform is small. There is no intention of loading it with sacks of grain or several days of firewood. This machine is designed to carry people quickly. Two wheels sit behind a team of horses. A pole connects the body of the vehicle to the harness. The occupants stand rather than sit. The entire design feels almost unnervingly exposed. There are no doors, no roof, no padded seats, no seat belts. The ancient world's idea of high-performance transportation assumes that you are willing to stand upright while horses run quickly over uneven ground. Apparently safety standards are still under development. The horses begin moving. The chariot rolls forward. Acceleration arrives with startling immediacy. Because the vehicle is light, the animals do not have to drag the same mass as a heavy wagon. The spoked wheels rotate rapidly. Their open centers flash as sunlight passes between the spokes. The ride is not smooth. You feel every irregularity in the earth through your legs. Your hands grip the rail. Dust rises behind the wheels. The driver controls the horses with reins while judging speed, direction, and terrain simultaneously. This is not merely transportation, it is a skill. Chariot driving demands balance. The vehicle has only two wheels. The occupants stand over or near the axle. Weight distribution matters enormously. Lean badly during a turn and the entire machine becomes unstable. A driver must anticipate corners. The horses must respond quickly. The ground must be suitable. The vehicle must survive repeated shocks. Speed magnifies every weakness. A loose fitting that seems harmless at walking pace can become extremely interesting when the horses are running. Spoked wheels therefore encourage improvements throughout the vehicle. The body becomes lighter. Joinery becomes more careful. Harnessing becomes more specialized. Horse training becomes more demanding. The wheel has changed, so the entire system changes with it. Your mind drifts toward a royal procession. The chariot here is not racing. It moves slowly enough for spectators to see its polished wood, decorated body, fine horses, and carefully made wheels. Technology becomes spectacle. A vehicle that requires skilled craftsmen, trained horses, specialized equipment, and experienced drivers naturally becomes associated with status. Kings and elites appear in chariots in ancient art. The vehicle communicates authority. It says that you control rare animals, skilled labor, expensive materials, and enough resources to maintain a machine that is considerably less useful for carrying onions than an ordinary wagon. Prestige has its costs. But warfare provides another reason for the light vehicle. A chariot can move warriors rapidly across suitable terrain. It can carry archers or other fighters. It can deliver commanders where they are needed. It can create noise, speed, and psychological impact. The famous chariot cultures of the ancient Near East use these vehicles as important military tools, particularly during the second millennium before the Common Era. Egyptians, Hittites, Mitanni, Assyrians, and others developed strong traditions of chariot warfare, though their designs and tactics vary. You stand on a broad plain where the terrain is relatively firm. This matters. A chariot is impressive on open ground. Place it on a steep rocky hillside and its personality changes rapidly. Wheels need space. Horses need footing. Drivers need room to maneuver. A battlefield suitable for chariots is therefore not simply any battlefield. Commanders must think about landscape. Hard ground can favor speed. Deep mud can ruin it. Narrow passes restrict movement. Rough terrain can break wheels. Weather becomes a military factor because rain can transform a fast vehicle into an expensive wooden inconvenience. A curious footnote is that some surviving ancient texts describe chariot horses with extraordinary care. Feeding schedules, training routines, exercise, and conditioning become matters worth recording. The vehicle may attract your eye, but its performance depends just as much on the animals pulling it. A badly trained horse can waste the finest wheel ever built. Teams must learn to accelerate together, turn together, stop together, ignore noise, respond to reins, remain calm around other horses and vehicles. The chariot is therefore a partnership between carpentry and animal training. One cannot replace the other. You watch a wheelmaker tap a spoke into position. The sound is crisp. The craft has become specialized enough that a good wheel may represent the work of someone with years of experience. Different woods may be selected for different components. The hub needs toughness. Spokes need strength without excessive weight. The rim needs resilience. In some cultures and periods, rawhide or other materials may help bind components. Later, metal fittings strengthen vulnerable areas. The wheel becomes a composite object. Several materials cooperate because no single material provides everything required. This is an important development in engineering. Instead of asking one thick piece of wood to do every job, craftspeople assign different jobs to different parts. The hub bears concentrated stress. The spokes transfer the load. The rim meets the ground. You recognize the logic because it still appears in wheels thousands of years later. The exact materials change. The principle remains remarkably durable. Scholars bicker over the exact origins of the spoked wheel and the earliest true chariot. Some argue for development in the Eurasian steppe and neighbouring regions. where horse-based mobility becomes increasingly significant. Others emphasize evidence from areas farther south and west, and archaeological definitions create additional complications. What exactly counts as a chariot? Is any light two-wheeled horse-drawn vehicle enough? Must it have spoked wheels? Must it be designed for speed? Historians still argue whether certain early vehicle remains represent genuine chariots or transitional forms between heavier carts and the specialized machines familiar from later records. The disagreement is partly a problem of preservation. A wooden vehicle can decay almost completely. Sometimes only wheel impressions, fittings, burial arrangements, or artistic representations remain. You're trying to reconstruct motion from objects that have not moved for several thousand years. Naturally, scholars manage to disagree. That is almost a professional tradition. What becomes much clearer is the importance of horses. Cattle remain excellent for pulling heavy loads slowly. Horses offer a different combination. They can move faster, they can accelerate quickly, they can sustain impressive travel under the right conditions. When paired with a light vehicle, their speed becomes mechanically useful. The spoked wheel and the horse suit one another. A heavy wheel would waste more of the animal's energy. A lighter wheel allows quicker response. The entire vehicle begins to behave differently. You feel this when the horses turn. The chariot swings in a broad arc. The outside wheel races across more ground. Dust sprays outward. The driver shifts weight. For an instant, the machine seems balanced between control and chaos. Then it straightens. The wheels settle. The horses surge ahead. A heavy wagon encourages patience. A chariot encourages confidence. Possibly too much confidence. One scandalous aside from the ancient world is that chariot racing eventually becomes entertainment on an enormous scale. Long after the earlier spoked wheels appear, races draw crowds, wealth, rivalries, and political passion. The practical engineering of a lighter wheel eventually helps create something familiar to any modern sports fan people, becoming emotionally invested in which team goes around a track fastest. Civilization progresses in mysterious ways, yet long before enormous racing arenas, the lighter wheel already changes communication. A messenger using fast horses and a suitable vehicle can cover ground differently from a slow freight wagon. Officials can move, news can travel. Elite passengers can journey with greater speed where roads and terrain permit. Distance feels slightly altered again. Not because the land becomes shorter, but because time across it changes. That is one of the wheel's recurring effects. A transportation improvement changes the meaning of space. A settlement that once feels several difficult days away may become more accessible. A ruler can project authority farther. A military force can move certain personnel more rapidly. Diplomatic missions travel. Ceremonial vehicles appear in processions. The spoked wheel becomes useful far beyond its wooden structure. You examine one closely as evening cools the workshop. Shadows fall through the empty spaces. That emptiness is the innovation. A great portion of the original mass has disappeared, yet the circle remains strong. The craftsperson has learned that strength does not always come from solidity. Sometimes it comes from structure. Material placed in the right location can do more than material placed everywhere. The principle is almost graceful. A spoke is narrow, but several spokes arranged correctly distribute enormous forces. The rim is made from sections, yet together they behave as a circle. The hub is small compared with the wheel, yet everything depends upon it. Efficiency becomes visible. You spin the wheel gently. It turns faster than the thick wooden discs used for heavy carts. The spokes blur. For a few moments, you cannot distinguish one from another. There is only motion. The wheel slows gradually, and the individual pieces become visible again. Hub, spoke, rim, a machine built by subtraction, less wood, less weight, more speed. The invention is not a new circle. It is a new understanding of how little of the circle needs to be solid. You arrive in a landscape where the wheel seems strangely absent. There are people everywhere. Markets are busy, buildings rise, goods move from place to place, fields are cultivated, merchants travel, messages pass between communities. And yet the familiar creak of a wooden cart is rare, perhaps missing entirely. At first, this feels puzzling. Once a society knows that round objects can rotate, surely everyone should want wheeled transport. But invention does not work that way. A technology can be brilliant in one environment and nearly useless in another. You stand at the edge of a steep mountain path. The trail climbs sharply between rocks. One side rises into a rough wall, the other drops toward a valley below. The path is barely wide enough for two people to pass. A pack animal walks along it with steady confidence. Now imagine bringing a wagon here. The problem becomes obvious almost immediately. A wheel needs room. A cart needs a reasonably continuous surface beneath it. A sharp turn can be difficult. A fallen rock can block the entire vehicle. A steep descent can send a heavy load accelerating in precisely the direction you would prefer it not to go. The animal carrying goods directly on its back simply steps around the obstacle. The cart cannot. You begin to understand that wheels are not automatically superior. They are specialists. They perform wonderfully under the right conditions. Firm ground helps. Moderate slopes help. Wide routes help. Suitable draft animals help. Enough traffic to justify road maintenance helps. Take away several of those conditions, and the famous wheel becomes a large wooden complication. You walk farther into the mountains. A line of pack animals approaches. Each animal carries bundles balanced across its body. The loads are smaller than those on a wagon, but the caravan is flexible. One animal can stop, another can continue. The group can spread out along a narrow trail. It can cross uneven ground. It can climb where a wheeled vehicle would require a carefully engineered road. Transportation here depends on legs rather than rolling surfaces, and legs are remarkably good at rough terrain. A hoof can land on one stone, then another. A wheel must find a continuous path between them. That difference shapes entire transportation systems. Records confirm that many complex societies rely heavily on pack animals, human porters, boats, or sledges, even when the principle of the wheel is known. The absence of carts does not mean the absence of technology. It may mean that people have chosen a better tool for their environment. This is an important distinction because historians once had a habit of treating the wheel almost like a universal test of advancement. If a society used wheeled vehicles, it appeared technologically sophisticated. If it did not, people sometimes assumed it had failed to invent something obvious. That judgment tells you more about modern expectations than ancient realities. You descend toward a river. Here, the problem changes completely. A broad waterway stretches into the distance. Boats sit near the bank. Workers load baskets and jars aboard. The vessel floats. That simple fact matters enormously. Water supports the load. A boat can carry a surprisingly large amount of cargo without requiring a road beneath it. The river itself becomes the route. No wheel ruts, no axle repairs, no need to clear stones for kilometres. If the current flows in the right direction, nature even helps with propulsion. You can almost hear a river merchant looking at an elaborate wagon and asking, with gentle confusion, why anyone would build a road beside perfectly good water. In river-rich regions, boats often outperform carts for bulk transport. Grain, timber, stone, pottery, and other heavy goods can move efficiently by water. Ports and landing places become transport centres. Roads still matter inland, but wheels may occupy a smaller role. The most useful technology is not the one that looks most advanced. It is the one that moves the load with the least trouble. You board a small vessel. The wooden hull shifts beneath your feet. Water touches the sides with a soft repetitive sound. Several heavy jars rest safely near the centre. Moving the same cargo across a rough landscape might require animals, drivers, carts, repairs, and maintained routes. Here, the river carries the weight almost politely. transportation choices become economic choices. A community must decide where to spend labour. Building and maintaining roads can require enormous effort. Trees must be cleared. Wet ground may need reinforcement. Bridges may be necessary. Steep slopes may need modification. Damage from rain must be repaired. If only a few carts use the road, that investment may not make sense. A footpath is cheaper. A river is cheaper still if it already goes where you need. Technology always has hidden costs. The cart itself costs wood. The axle needs maintenance. Draft animals need food. Drivers need time. Roads need attention. The wheel may reduce friction, but it does not reduce economics. You travel now to a tropical forest. Humidity hangs in the air. Leaves drip after rain. Roots twist across the ground. Vegetation crowds every open space. A narrow trail snakes between trees. The earth is soft. You push an imaginary cart forward. The wheel sinks. You push harder. It sinks farther. This is not encouraging. Large-wheeled vehicles perform poorly where soils remain wet or paths are densely obstructed. A person carrying a basket can step across a route. A pack animal can pick its way through. A cart must either force a route through or wait for someone to build one. Again, the wheel demands infrastructure. Without that infrastructure, it loses much of its advantage. A curious footnote appears in parts of ancient Mesoamerica. Archaeologists have found small objects, often described as wheeled figurines or toys, fitted with rotating wheels and axles. The people who made them clearly understand that a wheel can turn. Yet large-scale wheeled transport does not become a major feature of everyday life there. This surprises modern observers. Surely, you think, if someone can build a tiny wheeled animal, the next step is a cart, but the missing piece is not imagination. It is usefulness. Mesoamerica lacks large domesticated draft animals comparable to oxen or horses. There are no teams of cattle waiting to pull heavy wagons. Human beings could pull carts, certainly, but in rough landscapes the advantage may be limited. Combine that with mountains, forest, uneven routes, and strong traditions of human carrying, and wheeled freight becomes much less attractive. A tiny wheeled object can be entertaining or symbolic without becoming the basis for a transport revolution. The wheel exists. The transportation system does not. That difference is crucial. You hold one of these imagined miniature objects in your palm. It rolls easily across a flat surface. Charming. Clever. Now place it on a steep, muddy trail. Its career ends quickly. Oddly enough, this is one of the clearest reminders that invention and adoption are separate things. People can understand a technology perfectly well and still decide not to organize society around it. Modern life offers plenty of similar examples. Not everyone lives beside a railway. Not every city favors bicycles. Not every household owns the same appliances. Technologies fit into systems of geography, cost, culture, and habit. Ancient societies make the same calculations, though they do not describe them in those terms. You move farther south in your imagination toward the Andes. The mountains rise dramatically. Roads cross high passes. Stone steps climb slopes. Bridges span gorges. Human porters and pack animals such as llamas carry goods. The road network can be highly sophisticated without being designed for wheeled vehicles. This may seem contradictory at first. Why build excellent roads and then not use carts? Look down. The route includes stairs. A llama handles stairs with considerably more dignity than a wagon. The road has been designed for feet. That design shapes what works on it. A wheeled transport system would require a completely different kind of infrastructure. Gentler gradients, broader curves, more continuous surfaces, perhaps bridges capable of supporting heavier concentrated loads. Rebuilding an entire network merely to accommodate carts would demand vast labour. If existing methods already move goods effectively, the incentive may be weak. Scholars bicker over how much the absence of draft animals explains the limited use of wheeled transport in the pre-Columbian Americas compared with the importance of terrain, road design, political organization, and established labor systems. Historians still argue whether wheeled vehicles would have offered a substantial economic advantage in many of these environments, even if suitable draft animals had been available. There is no simple answer. Some valleys might have supported carts easily. Some plains could have benefited. Other regions would remain hostile to wheeled traffic. A continent is not one landscape. Neither is a civilization. You watch a group of porters climb a road. Each person carries a load adjusted to the body. The group moves steadily. There is no axle to brake, no wheel to sink, no vehicle body to overturn. If one section of the path narrows, they simply walk in single file. Human carrying can be labour-intensive, but where labour is organised on a large scale, it may function effectively. Political systems can shape transport choices just as strongly as geography. A state able to mobilise thousands of workers may depend on human porters because that system already exists. A society with abundant draft animals may instead invest more heavily in carts and wagons. Neither choice is inevitable. You begin to see the wheel less as destiny and more as an option. That may be slightly disappointing if you grew up hearing it described as the invention that changes everything. But it makes the history more interesting. Technology does not march forward in a straight line. It branches. Different societies solve the same problem in different ways. Some build roads for carts. Some build canals. Some breed pack animals. Some organize porters. Some depend on rivers. Some combine all of them. There is no law requiring every useful idea to become universal. Even within regions where carts are common, people still choose other methods when circumstances demand them. A merchant facing a mountain may unload a wagon and transfer goods to animals. A river trader may move cargo by boat because it is cheaper. A farmer may carry vegetables by hand because the field is only a short distance away. The wheel becomes one tool among many. That is a more realistic measure of technological success, not domination, appropriateness. You step onto a wet path and feel mud cling to your sandals. The texture is heavy and cool. A narrow-wheeled cart passes nearby and immediately begins cutting a deep groove into the ground. The driver urges the animal forward. The wheel slips. More mud gathers around it. The cart sinks slightly. A person carrying a basket walks past. For once, the simpler method wins effortlessly. You can almost sense the cart driver pretending not to notice. Climate creates these moments constantly. Dry seasons may favour wheels. Wet seasons may punish them. Frozen ground can change routes. Snow may make sledges preferable. Seasonal rivers may open or close transport corridors. Ancient transportation is flexible because nature refuses to commit to one surface. A technology that works wonderfully in midsummer may become useless in winter. Communities learn to switch methods. They keep boats, pack frames, sledges, carts, ropes, animals trained for different work. Efficiency comes from having choices. One scandalous aside is that the wheel's modern reputation benefits from living in a world that has spent enormous resources making wheels comfortable. Roads are paved, bridges are graded, tunnels are cut, drainage systems remove water, mountain passes are engineered. Modern people often look at smooth highways and conclude that wheels are naturally perfect. The landscape has actually been redesigned around them. Remove the asphalt, remove the bridges, remove the tunnels, remove the maintenance crews. Suddenly the ancient doubts make much more sense. You stand again on an unmodified path. The earth rises and falls naturally. Rocks remain where geology left them. Water chooses its own route. Vegetation pushes inward. Now ask whether a cart is useful. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. The answer depends entirely on where you're standing. That realization softens the old question of why certain civilizations did not use wheeled transport extensively. Perhaps the better question is why they should have. If a llama crosses the mountain reliably, use the llama. If a boat carries 10 times the cargo along a river, use the boat. If human porters move quickly along narrow roads already built for feet, use the porters. Innovation is not collecting inventions for display. It is matching solutions to needs. As daylight fades, you watch several forms of transport moving through the same landscape. A person carries a basket, an animal bears packs, a boat drifts along the river, farther away, where the land becomes flatter. A cart follows a broad track. None is universally superior. Each belongs to its environment. The famous circle has limits. And understanding those limits reveals something surprisingly human about technology. People do not adopt inventions because history expects them to. They adopt them when they make life easier. You stand beside a turning wheel and notice something that is easy to miss. The wheel is no longer only carrying a cart, its basic motion has escaped transportation. Rotation has become a language of machinery. A circular object turning around a center can move a vehicle, certainly, but it can also lift water, grind grain, shape wood, raise loads, transfer force, measure time, power workshops, and eventually set entire factories humming. The idea becomes larger than the object that first made it famous. You hear the low rumble of a millstone. Grain pours between heavy circular stones. One turns against the other, crushing kernels into flour. The mechanism is not a cart. Nothing is travelling down a road. Yet the same fascination with controlled rotation now performs useful work. A person turning a hand mill transforms muscle into circular motion. Later, animals can provide the force, water can provide it, wind can provide it. The circle becomes a way to capture energy. You place your hand near a wooden shaft turning steadily. The shaft transfers motion from one part of the machine to another. This is a profound development because a wheel does not always need to touch the ground. Sometimes it only needs to turn. Records confirm that ancient societies use rotary devices in milling, lifting water, pottery, transport, and mechanical systems of increasing complexity. Over centuries, craftspeople learn that rotation can be redirected. A turning wheel can drive another component. A shaft can carry motion. Gears can change speed and direction. Pulleys can lift loads. The principle spreads into tasks that would have looked unrelated to the first wooden vehicles. You walk toward an irrigation channel. Water glitters beneath sunlight. A large wheel turns near the bank, lifting water in containers attached around its edge. As the wheel rotates, empty containers descend, fill, rise, and empty into a higher channel. The motion repeats. Water that would naturally remain below is persuaded upward, not very far, but far enough circular motion becomes useful because repetition requires no reset. A worker lifting one bucket must lower it again. A rotating wheel brings the next container automatically. Each part of the circle follows the one ahead. The machine repeats its task as long as energy continues to turn it. This continuous action becomes one of rotation's greatest strengths. You hear splashing, wood creaks, water pours into a channel. Then another container rises, and another. Agriculture benefits from machines that can move water more efficiently, especially in regions where irrigation supports dense populations. The wheel is now helping move not just goods, but the water that makes crops possible. A curious footnote is that ancient engineers occasionally build machines so ingenious that later generations underestimate them. Complex gearing, water-driven mechanisms, lifting devices, and astronomical instruments reveal that craftspeople and scholars can manipulate rotational motion with impressive sophistication. The circle that once appears straightforward becomes part of a mechanical vocabulary. One wheel turns another. A small wheel can influence a larger one. Teeth cut around their edges allow motion to be transferred with greater control. Speed changes, force changes, direction changes. You watch two wooden gears mesh. One turns clockwise, the other turns the opposite way. The relationship seems almost playful. Push one. The other responds. Mechanical knowledge begins to resemble conversation. Transportation continues changing as well. Road networks expand in powerful states and empires. Governments discover that good roads are not merely convenient for merchants. They help move officials, messages, taxes, supplies, and armies. A reliable road can connect distant regions to political centres. You stand beside a well-constructed ancient road and feel the difference beneath your feet. The surface has been deliberately prepared. Drainage channels reduce water damage. Bridges cross obstacles. Grades may be chosen to make travel manageable. Milestones or markers can help travellers judge distance. The road is infrastructure built around repeated movement. Once governments invest heavily in such systems, wheeled transport becomes more dependable. A wagon can travel farther with less risk of becoming trapped. Trade becomes more predictable. A merchant who knows that a route is maintained can plan larger journeys. An official can send goods toward a distant administrative centre. A military force can receive supplies from behind the front. The wheel becomes tied to political power because movement itself becomes power. An empire may claim distant territory, but control becomes fragile if people, messages, and supplies cannot cross it. Roads make distance manageable. Wagons make roads economically useful. The combination strengthens states. Historians still argue whether transport improvements create stronger states or whether stronger states create transport improvements. The relationship likely runs both ways. A government with resources can build roads. Better roads increase trade and administrative reach. Increased wealth provides more resources for infrastructure. No agreement has been reached on which side of this cycle matters most in particular civilizations, and local conditions change the balance. But transportation and authority repeatedly grow together. You now hear a wagon entering a market town. The sound is ordinary again. That ordinariness hides enormous consequences. A merchant can carry heavier goods farther than human backs alone would comfortably allow. Metal tools arrive from one region. Wine or oil arrives from another. Textiles travel. Pottery travels. Salt travels. Timber travels. Food travels. Objects once limited by distance enter wider networks of exchange. This does not mean everyone suddenly enjoys cheap imported luxuries. Transport remains expensive. Roads can be dangerous. Animals must be fed. Wagons require repairs. Tolls may be collected. Weather interferes. But wider movement gives producers access to markets beyond their immediate neighbours. A craftsperson can sell farther away. A town can depend partly on food produced outside its walls. A mining region can exchange metal for grain. A coastal community can connect maritime trade with inland routes. The wheel becomes a bridge between different economies. You can almost smell the market. Spices, fish, animal sweat, bread, smoke, leather, dust. Goods from different places lie within a few steps of one another because transportation has drawn distant landscapes together. That connection changes everyday expectations. People begin encountering materials they could not produce locally. Styles spread, techniques spread, languages mix in trading centres, news travels with drivers and merchants. A cart carrying jars may also carry rumours, probably more rumours than jars. Human communication has always found room in the luggage. Warfare changes too, although not always in the glamorous form of fast vehicles. The truly important military wagon may be the one carrying food. Soldiers eat, animals eat, weapons need replacement, camps require tools, armies consume astonishing quantities of supplies. A force that moves farther from its home territory must somehow maintain a flow of provisions. Wagons can carry grain, tents, equipment, spare parts, and other necessities. Military logistics becomes inseparable from transportation. A famous commander may receive the praise. Some exhausted animal hauling flour along a muddy road quietly keeps the campaign functioning. One scandalous aside is that many dramatic military plans throughout history are eventually forced to negotiate with deeply undramatic questions, such as whether enough food can fit on wagons. Strategy meets arithmetic. The arithmetic usually wins. You leave the road and enter a workshop. Here, the wheel becomes more specialized again. A lathe turns a piece of material so a craftsperson can shape it evenly. A grinding wheel sharpens tools. A pulley lifts weight. A rotating spindle helps produce thread. Circular motion becomes embedded in manufacturing. The wheel is no longer one invention. It becomes a family of principles: rotation, leverage, continuous movement, mechanical transmission. The details grow more sophisticated over centuries, especially as metalworking improves. Metal fittings strengthen hubs. Iron tires can protect wooden rims. More durable axles reduce wear. Bearings improve. Road vehicles become capable of carrying greater loads and surviving longer journeys. The ancient thick wooden disc gradually gives way to increasingly specialized forms. Yet the circle remains. You move through time without needing to rush. A water wheel turns beside a river. Its paddles catch flowing water. The river supplies energy continuously. That rotation can grind grain or perform other work. Human muscle is no longer the only source of power. Animal muscle is no longer the only alternative. Nature turns the machine. Water pushes. The wheel rotates. The shaft carries motion inward. A millstone turns. Grain becomes flour. The entire process links landscape to machinery. Windmills eventually accomplish something similar using moving air. The source changes. The rotational principle stays familiar. A wheel can receive energy as easily as it can transmit it. This versatility helps make it foundational to later mechanical engineering. You might think an invention this old would eventually become obsolete. Instead, it becomes more common. Clock mechanisms depend on carefully controlled rotating components. Industrial machinery fills workshops with shafts, pulleys, gears, rollers, flywheels, and wheels of countless forms. Steam engines turn wheels. Railways place metal wheels on metal tracks. Bicycles reduce wheels to light, efficient structures. Automobiles add engines, pneumatic tires, braking systems, and precise steering. Aircraft hide wheels beneath themselves until they need the ground again. Even machines that never travel contain rotating components. Fans, turbines, motors, hard drives, pumps, generators. The ancient circle survives inside modern complexity. Oddly enough, some of the most advanced machines still depend on problems a prehistoric carpenter would recognize. Balance matters, friction matters, alignment matters, materials matter, heat matters. A badly aligned rotating component can destroy modern equipment just as surely as a crooked wooden hub can make an ancient cart miserable. The scale and precision change. The underlying concerns remain strangely familiar. You listen to a modern bearing turn almost silently. Its smoothness would seem magical in a workshop where wood rubs against wood. Yet the goal is identical. Reduce resistance, support weight, allow rotation, keep everything aligned. Thousands of years of engineering refine the same basic problem. The wheel also reshapes how humans imagine distance. A journey once measured in days of walking can become hours of driving. Goods cross continents. Cities depend on supplies transported from hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. Food reaches tables far from where it grows. Building materials move between regions. Emergency vehicles cross streets quickly. Public transport carries millions of passengers. The modern world assumes movement on a scale that would be difficult to imagine without rolling transport and rotary machinery. The wheel becomes so common that you barely notice it. That may be its final triumph. You do not wake each morning astonished that buses have wheels. You do not stare in wonder at the casters beneath an office chair. You do not hold a suitcase wheel reverently and thank ancient carpenters. Perhaps you should, at least once. A tiny plastic wheel beneath luggage is the descendant of an astonishingly long chain of experimentation. Different materials, different sizes, different speeds. Same persistent idea. You place your hand against one final turning wheel. It could belong to almost any period. The edge moves beneath your palm. The center remains controlled. The circle repeats itself endlessly. No corners, no final side. Only rotation. A device so visually simple becomes one of humanity's most adaptable mechanical principles. It carries harvests, moves people, feeds cities, powers machines, connects markets, supports armies, raises water, grinds grain, and quietly turns inside technologies their earliest makers could never have imagined. The wheel does not change civilization in one dramatic moment. Its influence accumulates, journey by journey, machine by machine, generation by generation. And perhaps that is why its story feels so human. A simple problem receives a practical solution. The solution creates new possibilities. Those possibilities invite more invention. And the circle keeps turning. The road grows quieter now. The last wheel rolls into the distance, its soft rhythm fading beneath an evening sky. You no longer need to follow it. The workshops, markets, fields, rivers, and roads settle gently into darkness, each one carrying the memory of hands that shaped wood, trained animals, repaired broken parts, and found patient ways to make heavy things move. You can let those sounds soften. The creak of timber becomes distant. The hoof beats slow. The turning mill quiets beside the water. Even the dust seems to settle. Nothing more needs to be invented tonight. The circle can continue without you, turning slowly through centuries of human effort, carrying ordinary lives forward one quiet rotation at a time. Your breathing can become easy now, unhurried and light, while the final image fades into darkness. A wooden wheel turns once more, then more slowly, then almost silently, and finally it rests.